So we started out here just going through the family tree. I won't go through what every single one of these are, right? But we have New World monkeys, Old World monkeys. We have lesser apes, great apes, etc. And we just kind of go up and up and up and up and up and up and up. We also looked at, generally speaking, the history of the world. Where's my? Did I do this on the other one? I did it on the other one. Close out of that. And we started looking at the history of the world wherever I could find it. Okay, so again, the Earth is about 4.6 billion years old. And life first emerged around this point here about like 500 million years ago. The Earth itself had no oxygen till about 1.8 billion years ago, yada yada. And so we looked at from 4.6 billion years all the way up to the last million years. So where we're kind of focused on today is just this little sliver, the last million years. If we're looking at the entire geological timeline, this is tiny. This is a second. What a second is to you is what this million years is to the Earth. Let's take a look at that. Let's finish this section up. So humans, we're going to look at, well, where we last left off yesterday was we figured out that, okay, of these hominins, the only ones left as of a million years ago are the Homo genus, of which there are many species. We know that humans are, this is 16, we know that humans are Homo, our genus name, we'll learn about that later, sapiens. So when most people think of this, they think of Homo sapiens, but there have been other ones. There have been other ones. Okay. So this Homo genus includes us, but there were extinct humans. There have been other humans out there. There have been a different species of human. If you guys remember Lucy, remember that skeleton we showed there, that 4 million year old skeleton? Lucy was a hominin. She was not a human, right? Like we saw what a reconstruction was. Like, that doesn't look like us. So the Homo genus first appeared about 3 million years ago. These species had bigger brains. That's a common feature of primates and hominins. Lighter skeletons, flatter faces, smaller teeth, etc. But we are the first species to know how to control fire and to modify stone tools. But we are not the only species to use tools. Has anyone ever seen like videos of like really smart pets, like on like TikTok or YouTube or whatever? Crows, dogs, even cats and stuff, octopuses, rats. Lots of animals have been documented using tools. So have primates. Primates have used tools. So that's not a uniquely human feature. Using and controlling fire is. So we're going to go through all the different ones. So again, we're zooming in on those last few million years here. Here's now. And let's say this is 3 million years. 3 million years ago. We're going to look at our first one here, which was the dominant species during this time period. That's about 1 million years. So over about 1 million years, we had what's called Homo habilis. This is the first one. So they lived in Africa. As we remember, humans started in Africa and then they spread throughout the world, right? So they started in Africa and they were still able to climb trees. Eventually, though, I really want to pay close attention to this date. So they lived for 1 million years, 2.4 million years ago to 1.4 million years ago. There was another species, though, which lived from 1.8 to 1.3 million years ago. If you guys are noticing here, there was an overlap. That's very common. In fact, that's expected with humans and with other animals. There was, in fact, an overlap. Eventually, though, the more dominant species survives and the non-dominant one dies. Why is this a more dominant species? Taller, stronger, lighter, bigger brain, right? This is when we have what we would classify as a human nose has first appeared. What does it mean to have a human nose? Your nostrils go down. Doesn't seem that, that seems like such a weird point, but like, if you guys ever go to a zoo or something, really look at like the nostrils of the animals. They're all facing to the front. So this is where our nostrils face down. And this, we believe, is the species that, here's Africa, blah, 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 here's all the continents, yada, 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 yada. These are the ones that we believe scattered throughout Africa and into Europe and Asia. Next, we get to what's probably the second most well-known, Homo erectus. So Homo erectus, we're around from 1.8 million to 4 million years ago. And again, I really want to put this out. Homo habilis, alive. Homo ergaster, alive. Homo erectus, alive. All of these were alive at the same point in time. So at some point, we had 3 different species of humans walking around at the exact same period of time, at the exact same places. So we believe they originated from the Homo ergaster, and they specifically went into areas in Indonesia and China. They went into, I did a bad job on my map here, but they went into this area here that I'm kind of circling. How are they different? Again, to be a species, they have to be unique enough and involve a couple other criteria. They had more human-like teeth, and they were, again, quite tall as Homo sapiens, as tall as us. So they're bigger and they're taller. And they probably had some larger brains. That said, there's also hobbits. What we would kind of classify as like a hobbit, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, kind of existed. There's a Homo floresiensis that existed, and it was about 1 meter tall. They didn't classify it as a new human species. A little bit out of my pay scale there. I'm not sure why, because I feel like it's quite distinct actually with their wrists and other things. But same thing, they were still using tools. Oh god, I always butcher this. Homo heidelbergensis. Homo heidelbergensis. You're not going to need to like know all the differences between these, by the way. I just want to make that clear. You're not going to have to memorize the difference between a habilis and an ergaster. That's fine. So these things, what the heck are these? These are the species between the ergasters and us. They're kind of in the middle. Same thing, larger brains, thinner bones. You're noticing that trend, right? As we go from each generation or each species to species, bigger brain, then a bigger brain, then an even bigger one. And again, we now have an even bigger brain. And then we go to Neanderthal. If you've ever heard of the term Neanderthal, this is where it comes from. It was a human species. This was our direct ancestor, our latest ancestor, rather. So they evolved in Europe and Asia about 200 million years ago. We actually went shorter. Before Homo erectus was as tall as Homo sapiens. We've gone shorter though. It does have a biological advantage. We've gone shorter, but now we've gone thicker, more muscular, thicker bones. So we went from this trend of you're always going to go taller and thinner, taller and thinner, taller and thinner to now Homo Neanderthal, shorter, sturdier. So shorter, more muscle mass, and then even most modern humans, they used fire as all of these did. Used fire, used tools, but we created complex shelters. We know that there was language. This is unclear for the other ones thus far. We know that there was care for the sick, and we know that they buried the dead. Question, and like it's fine to guess, how do we know so much more about these guys than all of these. We know about their social structures here. How is that possible? More recent in time. It's more recent in time. And they're building stuff. They're leaving traces behind. They're able to leave traces. They have graveyards that we find, right? So we use those as clues to, well, if they're burying people all in the same place, and we see some tools are buried with this person, that seems kind of ceremonial, right? Like if we have an astronaut who dies today, they might get buried with something to represent that they went to space, for example, right? If you're someone who's a hockey player, they might get buried with a hockey puck, etc. So we start to see this stuff emerge. So this is why we know so much about Homo neanderthals. One other thing I want to point out as well is about 200,000 years ago, we had an ice age. And at that time, there was only 5,000 humans left. The population got wiped out. There's only 5,000 left. All of the over 8 billion people alive today came from those 5,000. So we lost an intense amount of genetic diversity, a lot of it. So these Neanderthals, that's what we call them, right? Are they our ancestors? In Europe and the Middle East? Possibly. There's mixed theories about this. So we know that there was a little bit of overlap, but not a lot. Before, there was hundreds of thousands of years of overlap, right? With the others, those other three. Now we only have 10,000 years. And we're able to date that quite accurately because it's so recent. So 10,000 years. That's how little intermingling they had. And then eventually the Neanderthals died. How come? They got outcompeted, right? Just like everything else, they got outcompeted. Modern humans, smarter, more able to adapt, more able to use tools. One theory is they killed them. Another theory is we interbred. And that theory is given some credence in that we can still look at people in Europe and Asia, and we can still find traces of Neanderthal DNA. So it's possible that instead of the only real two outcomes are one killed the other, or they coexisted and they died out over a couple of generations, but they passed their DNA on. So modern day humans, we could be a hybrid of it, for example. So again, some people think that there was interbreeding. Some people think that it was a separate species. They did not contribute to the human gene pool, and we killed them. We axed them. It's unknown for sure. Both theories have some pretty good credence towards it. I've listened to a couple podcasts about it. It's actually quite interesting. Anyways, long story short, they were from 200,000 years ago, 200K, to 30,000 years ago, 30K years ago. Does anyone know how old, like, the Mayans, the Egyptians, the Romans, stuff like that, how old those civilizations are? Or any guesses? 5,000? It's a good guess. It kind of depends on it. Some of them are as old as 10,000 years ago that we're able to document. I took an entire class on the Mayans and I forget. I think the Mayans are about 9,000 years ago. Egyptians are, I think they date back as about 5,000 years ago, etc. The Chinese about 5,000 years ago, if I'm recalling, I'm pulling numbers out of my head that I think I remember. But so 30,000 years ago, these Neanderthals died. Our ancient civilizations as we know it were around about 10,000 years ago. So we're not that far removed from them, right? Like, again, like this is a fraction of a second. We think about the global timeline, right? So 30,000 years sounds like a lot, but as we've been looking the last 2 days, it really is not a lot of time. So where do we come from? We are not Homo erectus. We are Homo sapiens. So Homo sapiens are a little bit more slender than the other ones. So we're kind of continuing. We have thinner skulls. We have more round faces. Eventually, our chins came in, our brows came in. So more flatter faces. But we did get more prominent chins than the other ones. So humans appeared about 200,000 years ago as well. So I'm taking all these homos, all of these potential early humans, and we've put them on a timeline. And here's what we can see. And you can see when there are intersections, right? At some point in time, about 4 different species of humans, the Homo ancestors, walked the earth. At some point in time, all at the same time, they were walking the earth. So we are not that unique. There have been many other species similar to humans. So 30,000 years ago, though, is when we're the last ones left. Okay. So how did modern humans spread? Modern humans. We know that the other Homo species did spread. We know that they've done that, but what about us? We don't care about Homo erectus anymore. We want to know about how did humans get from place to place to place to place to place? Because we started in Africa, just like before, and we emerged. So we have a couple of hypotheses. One of the most common one, in fact, the most well-supported one that we know of is what's called the out of Africa hypothesis. Why is this a well-supported one? DNA analysis. So we can look at modern day humans. You, me, people in Europe, people in Asia, we can look at their DNA versus the DNA of remains that we found from 30,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago. We can look at the DNAs and we can compare them. So our mitochondria, remember those are the powerhouses of the cell, those change very little over time. They have basically kept the exact same. It's like a crocodile. It's the DNA's version of a crocodile. Crocodiles are the exact same now as they were 400 million years ago. There's like no difference. There's some, but there's very minor differences. So we have almost identical mitochondrial DNA. So what I can do is I can take my DNA, I can compare it to the DNA of someone from 30,000 years ago, and if this mitochondria DNA is almost the exact same, that means at some point through tens of thousands of years, through generation after generation after generation after generation after generation, we had a Neanderthal, sorry, I'm not a Neanderthal ancestor. We had an ancestor from one of the early humans. We have found this all over the world. It's more common in Africa, but it does exist all over the world, every continent. We have found this. This DNA is only inherited from the mother. But yeah, so out of the Africa hypothesis, quite popular. So where did human culture appear? Like, so before I get into that, what is it? What do I mean culture? What is culture? You don't need to have a perfect definition, but you probably have some words coming to your mind. What does it mean to have culture? Yeah, like what's a culture?
Isn't it that your beliefs in your own?
Part of it, yeah. No, you're definitely on the right track. Like it, right? It's our beliefs, it's our traditions, it's what we are. We as a culture today, modern day, we speak a language. Many people believe in a higher entity, for example. What do? We bury our dead, we grieve them, for example. We trade. Those are all features of culture. So culture, or at least evidence of it, first started to appear 40,000 years ago. What does that mean? Art. We've all seen like pictures of cave paintings in movies and stuff, right? Art, language, evidence of trade between two distinctly different like tribes or nations or groups, whatever it is. So we start seeing culture about 40,000 years ago. And at that point, then we start to bleed more into what we would call like classical history, like where we eventually get to the Romans, the Egyptians, the Mayans, the first peoples here, etc. So we'll kind of cut it off there because the main goal is to kind of focus on like where did modern humans come from, not what did modern humans do once they were here. We have a pretty decent idea of that part. Okay, So that is chapter 16. That's all about primates. So any questions on that before we keep going? Okay, hearing none. That. Stop that.